Jan, thank you so much for joining me today. You're a pastor in South Africa. Can you just tell us briefly what church do you serve?
Hello, Albert. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm in the Dutch Reformed Church. Our congregation is called the Pierre van Ryneveld Community Church. It's in the suburb of Pierre van Ryneveld in Pretoria. We have in the region of 3,500 members. About 40% of them is in our services on a Sunday. Four full-time pastors as colleagues, and then a number of other staff and some administrative staff. And normal might be a normal suburban evangelical church in the US.
So that is, compared to most churches here in the northeast of America, that's a huge church. How has this whole pandemic and the virus affected the church in South Africa?
Albert, we've now been in lockdown. It's our 5th week of lockdown. On the last Sunday of March, we were prohibited from having any large gatherings. So a church like this revolves around its services on a Sunday. All the ministries happen more or less over the weekend and in large groups. So what happened was we came to a grinding halt. Everybody stayed home, and we had to negotiate a whole new world of internet-based ministry. We started a home church that we do in the week and then send out on a Sunday, and all the different communication means that you try to keep contact and keep people together. It's a complete new world that we are trying to negotiate. As the church in South Africa, not only our congregation. Smaller churches have it a little bit easier in the sense that there's closer relationships. We just flying blindly in a sense.
So when you think about what's happening around the world, what would you say are your biggest concerns about the future?
As many people have said, intelligent people as well as people like myself, there's no normal that we are going back to. On the one hand, as an individual, it excites me because that's the way I'm made up. On the other hand, as an individual, it gives me lots of cause to worry for one's own family. Infections that will come, economic hardship. Before we started, we were a country with zero resources. We've got a huge amount of poor people in our country. So there's a landscape that lies ahead that I know would be a difficult landscape to go through. Church-wise, we just don't know. Maybe in 2 months from now, we don't have any resources to have staff salaries. So my concerns are, in a sense, a difficult stretch of journey that we're going into, and how will church be church in that sense? That we're going to suffer, and will we be able to be church and be Christians and followers of Jesus through that suffering?
Is there anything in particular that gives you hope?
Well, we've now basically for 5 weeks, we've in 1 week we had to sit down and say, what are we going to do on Sunday? And we sort of put together a hasty strategy that we thought that would be sort of in line with what we've been doing, and that has been working very well. People are very excited to connect. So there's a latent resilience and excitedness and courage and hope in people that was sort of on the drug of capitalism in a sense. So this has stripped us of that, and what lies underneath that we experience is a new sense of no, we're going to get through this. So that gives me hope. I also, in my own spiritual journey with Christ, times of difficulty was the times where um, I really got close to the Lord. And we see that in our interactions with people, even online. So, and the Lord is waiting for us in the midst of the chaos that lies in front. He's waiting for us to take our hands and say, let me lead you through this. So my hope rises from my relationship with Christ, but also how Christians, people that I've known for a long time, react in a way that I didn't expect, react with resilience and hope, because Christ lives in them, and they've lost what they can hold on to. And they don't fall away in that sense. They fall into the arms of Christ. So that gives me lots of hope, Albert.
So, you being a pastor, let me ask you this question. Where do you see God in all of this? Do you think this is a judgment? Do you think this is a wake-up call for people? Do you think this is a shaking of, of all of us? How do you see that?
Well, we survived the Black Death in the Middle Ages, the humanity. We survived the 1917-18 flu epidemic. And it seems as if these things happen on this place where we live as humans. God is not absent, but he's not the author of evil. So the way that I understand and work through it for myself is to understand that God gave his son to be in the midst of the chaos, die and rise again, to be with us as we move through it. On Good Friday morning, I did a sermon on lament, which is the proper Christian response that we gather from the Old Testament. And it's a sign of our love for God, our relationship with God, that we can take the words of lament on our lips and let that sort of bring out what we really experience and be with God through that time. So I'm not holding God responsible. I've had enough bad times in my own life to understand that God is present, God is here, the universal Jesus Christ, not only the Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ is in our midst, and we walk forward in his presence. To think of it as judgment, would be unbiblical in my perspective.
Well, thank you for that. One more question. For those who might be watching this, what would you say to them in terms of how we can pray for the people in South Africa, and what can we pray for?
Thank you, Albert. Everybody needs to be prayed for. So if I can put in a request, in South Africa, for our leadership, our president, he's in a precarious political position, but he's taking bold, very intelligent, very thought through and discerned actions. Interesting, he was a member of a youth Christian organization, our president. So we have photos of them praying behind the scenes before they go to make the big announcement. So pray for our leadership. Our leadership is half of our leadership in the country is corrupt. And the uncorrupted leadership must take the day in the end. Pray for the people, the vulnerable people in South Africa. 50% of our population lives below the breadline. Internationally, $1.20 a day. 50% of the 57 million people. 10 million people in South Africa have to work today to eat tomorrow. If we don't, after the lockdown, establish a good gradient for our infection rate, there will be chaos. So pray for those vulnerable peoples. And then, our frontline workers, my whole family is in the medical world, your wife as well. They're stepping up and they're stepping up and they're stepping up. And for the church in South Africa, pray for that we can be the light of the world and the salt in a time of darkness and a time of that's a bitter time. For us as followers of Jesus to really follow him and to trust him where he takes us.
I appreciate that. Finally, on a more lighter note, I know South Africans love to braai, to barbecue. And from what I'm seeing, that's now a nightly occurrence for most people.
Yeah. Well, everybody's staying at home, so you don't have the opportunity. The problem is that you can't buy as much. There's not as much availability. The butcheries are closed, so you have to buy your meat at the supermarket, and there's just a sort of a range. And then we have our government has stopped the sales of alcohol and tobacco during the time of the lockdown. So everybody is going very low on whatever the stash is. So the braai without a beer is a difficult thing for South Africa. So many of my friends and many of the congregation members I know are looking forward to next Friday, the 30th of April, or the Thursday, just to be able to have a beer with a braai and not just the meat.
Yeah, that might be an additional crisis. Well, Jan, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and may God bless you and your colleagues and all fellow South Africans. And thank you for allowing me to to zoom in a little on what life has been like for you in the midst of this crisis.
Thank you, Albert. And we, as a congregation, will be praying for you guys as well. You're in a sense at this point in a deeper crisis than we are. So be aware of our thoughts and our prayers as you go through that.
Thank you.